used to volunteer for what used to be called the Novice Clinic, and then it got renamed the Skills Clinic. And I used to give the classroom talk on what to expect is going to happen on the surf day. So that's launching and landing a kayak in surf. And I found my old notes for that, and I was just going to stand here and read them with no pictures. And but of course, having pictures and then animations like those waves is more fun. So I have made a slideshow out of it, a PowerPoint presentation. And I also had a personal thing that I like to talk about, why waves behave they do, wave mechanics for kayakers, which was also a written paper. And I was going to stand here and read it. I have a lot of pictures for that. And I also gave a talk called Reading the Water at a paddle fest years ago. And I found all these documents when I talked to Steve about giving a talk for this new member series. And I have done a lot of kayaking. As it turns out, I've paddled the entire coast of British Columbia, Washington, Oregon, California, and Baja Norte in a kayak, and big parts of the Sea of Cortez and the Li River in China, and a few other places like that. And so, am I an expert? Probably not, but I do have a lot of fun stories to share. And the first one is, and that is that if you're going to play in the surf, you probably should be careful. The waves are powerful, and you should first of all learn to brace safely, which will protect your own joints. And you should think about, when you're out in the surf, you don't want to get close to your friends and then smack into them when a wave pushes you around. And I like to sit in the surf and look behind me and imagine a triangle of where I might go if a wave surprised me right now. And if some of my friends are in that triangle, then I try and move somewhere else so that I don't run into other boaters out there. And when you're landing on a beach, you also worry about if there are kids playing in the water. You don't want to side surf into them and smack a little kid. So think about where your boat is going and where it might go. That's a safe way to go. And you should learn to brace. I'm going to talk about that a little bit. I imagine that there's people are going to talk about things like bracing and other paddle strokes. I'm just going to talk about a couple that are useful in the surf. So does anybody want to volunteer? What's wrong with this picture? If nobody wants to raise their hand, there's a couple things wrong. I think this is way too many boats on one wave. And of course, if you look carefully at the picture, you'll see they aren't even wearing wetsuits, but they are racers. And that gives them they claim they're going to be working so hard they don't need a wetsuit, and they're willing to smack into each other. So if you're new to this, and I see a lot of familiar faces, so you probably know all this. So I'm going to run through this. What is a brace? And a brace is when you place one end of your paddle in the water to create some temporary stability. And sometimes that temporary stability can last a long time. But the basic idea is your boat is long and skinny, and it's like a two-legged stool, which is going to fall over if you don't balance on it carefully. But if you place one paddle in the water, it creates a third point and makes this wonderful three-legged stool. It makes a 3-point stability, which makes it easier to hold your boat up or to recover your balance. And here's one of the popular braces. It's the low brace. And you can, if you look at these pictures, you can slap the water with your paddle, which will just supply an impulse, say, to get you right side up when you think you're tipping over. While you're moving, you can drag one paddle in the water, and then the motion of the water under the paddle, if you hold it at the right angle, will generate lift and help stabilize you. In this case, he's looking over his shoulder. He's not paying attention to where he's going, and it helps you balance while you're looking around. And then an important case for us today in this talk is that you can place it on a wave, and the physics of the wave actually helps with this and allows you to use the stability for an amazingly long period of time. There's another kind of brace that I think is really the best one to use in surf, and it's the high brace. And that's actually the last brace I'm going to have a picture of. I think she's sculling. So there are sculling braces. There's the brace that the Greenland kayakers use, where you can use your body as the third point of stability and lay down in the water and take a nap. That one is fun. And but these two, the low brace and the high brace, are the only ones that I have. Well, I guess that's not true. I've used a sculling brace in this surf once, and it was amazing how well it worked. But the high brace is really the one I suspect you're most likely to use. So this is a class about launching and then landing through surf, and it's not going to be a class about surfing. It's going to be you want to safely get through the surf, and then you want to safely get back to land, and that's all it's going to be. So it's not going to be the wild ride of surfing straight down the wave and hot dogging. It's just going to be what is the quickest, safest way of getting through the surf and back in again. And of course, one way to make that as safe as possible is to choose your beach very carefully. You want a gently sloping beach. Here's an example, so that there's a and I lost the picture, but I had a picture of what are the different areas of the beach. Well, the first area of the beach is this soup zone here, where there's shallow water. There's waves that have already broken way out there and lost most of their energy. And then there's the impact zone where the waves are breaking. And then outside the impact zone is outside. And when you want to get out through the surf, that's your goal, is to get to the outside as safely as possible. The advantage of a beach that has a soup zone is that you can get in your boat, you can close your spray skirt, you can get out into water that's deep enough to paddle in, and yet it's a gentle area where there may be these breaking waves, but they're broken waves, but they're easy to paddle over, and you can sit there in the soup zone and relax and catch your breath and watch the waves when they do break, watch the impact zone. And the impact zone, you might see big waves break and then small waves break. And that when there's small waves in the impact zone, that's called a window. And you want to try and predict when there's going to be a window and then paddle out through the impact zone as quickly as possible. There are also different kinds of waves. I'm going to talk about some of those later. But the kind that you want, if you get to choose your beach, you choose a beach that has spilling waves. And the spilling waves kind of rise up to break, and then they kind of fall over and spill down their face. And so even if a wave breaks in front of you, it doesn't like land on your head and knock you back as easily as a plunging wave is another kind. And so if you get a choice, you choose a beach that has spilling waves. And so here's a favorite bass place. This is Russian Gulch Beach. And there's somebody over on the, can everybody see my cursor if I point at stuff here? There's a good. So there's somebody here getting into the soup zone, and he's got lots of room here to get ready. And you can see there's a wave breaking far from him. And it's going to, he's going to be able to wait here until a good time to launch. And then a piece of advice that everybody always gives you is that once you decide that you should go, you shouldn't be wishy-washy about it. You should commit to going through the impact zone, because if you hesitate, all is lost and you'll get surfed backwards. Now, this guy is doing pretty good. I think he's made it over the breaking waves, but I'm a little unhappy with the fact that he has his paddle held in front of him. And this is an instinct that I know I've done it. I don't know why we as kayakers do this, but there's an instinct to hold your paddle up as you go over a wave, and even to hold it over your head. And one of the reasons we practice braces like the high brace is that it keeps your elbows bent, it keeps your shoulders down, your elbows below your shoulders. And so if a wave hits his paddle like this, well, his elbows are down, so his position is good. But why do we hold the paddle over our head? I don't know why. Why would you want to keep your paddle dry? It's going to get wet anyway. The appropriate thing to do as you're breaking through a wave or paddling over a wave would be to hold the paddle on the side of your boat so that it spears the water and it passes through the wave with no resistance. If the wave hit this guy's paddle, it would help push him back, and you don't want that. And if the wave gets really big, let's look at a couple more examples. Here's somebody who got wet as he went over the wave, but he's still paddling, and that is the thing I wanted to see in the other picture. If your paddle isn't tucked next to your boat to spear through the wave, I would like to see it still paddling to generate more thrust to make sure you get through this wave. And here's even more extreme example. And this guy is still paddling. I love that. The way it looks like the wave actually broke over his boat. But if you bend your head down and spear the wave with the top of your helmet, then your body presents less surface area for the wave to push back. And then if he was, while he was in the wave, if his paddle was held on the side, then the wave had no grip on the paddle to hold it back. And then as you come out the other side of the wave like this, even if you're blind, your paddle should be coming up to do another stroke on the other side. And once you've committed to going out through the surf, you want to keep paddling even after you say, I made it, I'm done, I'm through this wave. No, there could be another one. So as you come out the back of a wave, you should keep paddling to make sure that the next one doesn't push you back and make you start all over again. So I always hate those manuals that say things like, here's how to put your folding kayak together. And then you get to the end of the book and it says, taking the kayak apart is the reverse of assembly. No, the reverse of going out through the surf is not how you come back through the surf. It is a little bit different. Like waiting in the soup zone, you can wait outside the, hold on, I need to reject that. You have an opportunity to wait outside the impact zone and watch the waves for a while, and you can watch where they break. And you would like to get as close as you dare. You want to get close to where the waves are breaking. And then when do they break? Like waiting for a window when you are going on your way out. You want to find a time when the waves calm down and try and sneak in when there aren't any big waves breaking. There's I wouldn't call this a problem, but many people have a stronger brace on one side than on the other. So you may be used to bracing on your right side, and you can pick your angle when you're about to land. You can turn your boat at even a 45-degree angle and then head in towards the beach at that angle, because you know, and I have a slide for this later, but you know that your boat is going to turn sideways in the surf. And if you are most familiar with bracing on your right-hand side, you want to point the boat to the right. So when you broach, you'll be sideways and you'll be ready to do your favorite brace. And you want to watch for others. Let's go to the next slide. And so here's a guy heading in, waiting, trying to find the place where the waves break. And then as he gets to the impact zone, you want to wait actually waiting for a big wave is a pretty good trick if you can time it right, but you want to follow that wave in. As it says here, waves move faster than you do. So you can't you can't actually chase a wave in. You have to follow one in, and you're going to get further and further behind. But what you don't want to happen is you don't want to pick a wave and then fall off the end of it before it breaks or as it's breaking. Fortunately, the waves are moving faster than you, and it's going to be rather difficult to do that. But if you follow a wave in, and they show somebody in the soup zone here, the wave is, it's not this wave that you're following that you're going to be side surfing in. It's going to be the next one as it catches up with you. So after you paddle over the impact zone, you want to broach your boat. And so broach and brace is a term I keep using, but broach is actually a nautical term that means turn your boat sideways, broaching your boat. And so here's a guy who's turning his boat sideways. And there's actually a wonderful thing that I like about surf, and that is that your boat wants to turn sideways to the wave. If you were interested in surfing, it's actually kind of hard to keep the nose of the boat pointing at the shore, because if you look at this picture, the tail of this guy's boat is being picked up by the wave behind him. He's coming in at that 45-degree angle, it looks like, that I recommended for people who want to brace on the right-hand side. And the nose of his boat is being pushed down into the water. So there's a buoyancy force that's trying to pick up the bow of your boat, and there's the gravity trying to drop the tail of your boat down. And the typical thing that happens is the tail of the boat is rotated down the face of the wave, and the bow of the boat rotates up the face of the wave. And so your boat will turn sideways. And this is why I like to say the physics is on your side, because the physics is trying to turn you sideways. And that's the direction you want to be turned. It's great. And then you either set up to brace like this guy is doing, or you, as your boat is turned sideways, the wave is already upon you, and you get ready to brace. And I have another slide for that later, but this is a perfect setup here. So you see he's in the high brace, so his shoulders are protected from problems. And he's got his boat parallel to the waves, and he's got one edge picked up, and it's the edge towards the beach. And we call that mooning the beach. You want to moon the beach. You want to raise the hip, or actually raise the edge of the boat that's facing the beach, because the wave is going to push you sideways, and your boat is going to skip across the surface of the water. If you let that edge of the boat drop down, it will dig into the water, the boat will stop, and then the wave will roll you over. So you want to moon the beach, raise that edge, and then as the wave hits you, and sometimes it seems to hit you with tremendous force, you want to attack the wave with the flat of your paddle there, and then the wave will pick you up, and you get a wild ride, free ride all the way back to the beach. And another thing a thing I like about this picture is that you can see there's a really big wave behind this guy. Oh my God. It would have been terrible to get hit by that one, but he's riding on the wave before it. So once you get through the impact zone, I think you want to grab the first wave you can, even if it looks small, even if it looks a little big, because there might be an even bigger one coming behind you. And so the first wave you take can side surf you all the way to shore, and that will protect you from something bigger coming along later. So here's some details when you are edging your boat. So if you imagine these two guys have a wave coming from their right, my left, both of them have raised the edge towards the shore so that their boat will skim across the surface. That's good. But this guy is leaning over, and this guy is edging, meaning that he's still balanced over his boat, and he's not likely to fall over. Now, if there's a wave here, you can lean into the wave, and you can use your body to help. The wave will buoy you up, and it will help keep you upright. But the problem with this is that eventually, as you get closer and closer to shore, the wave will lose energy, and eventually it will lose all of its energy. And since you're overbalanced, you'll fall over. Whereas if you're edging, then you'll stay balanced even when the wave stops providing energy. And This is the combination of those things. Here's a guy who's edging his boat. He's leaning more than he's edging. I'm not happy with that, but his boat is moving rapidly to his right. He's got a high brace with his elbows and his shoulders protected. I love that. And he has his paddle buried in the wave. He's attacked the wave. And here's the magic reason why this works so well. That from his point of view, he's sliding towards shore in his boat, and the water underneath him is actually still, but relative to his motion, it seems as if the water is moving underneath him. And yet the water has a low level, and then behind the breaking the break in the wave, the pile of white water, the water has a higher level. So between under the boat and behind the boat, the water has to rise, and sometimes it's quite a big distance if you're side surfing on a large wave. And so there is apparent water flowing up behind you, and when you stick your paddle into this water, your paddle can use that flowing water to generate a force that helps hold you upright. And so the physics is helping you again. The wave is providing energy to keep your paddle high and to provide energy for you to have something to lean on and help keep yourself stable, to provide that third leg of stability. And it is amazing how a huge wave, and you can survive with this technique because that third point of stability and the force of the water flowing up the wave can allow you to keep yourself vertical, or your at least your head upright for a long time, for most of the ride back to shore. And this picture is I read a book called The Manual of Sea Kayaking by Derek Hutchinson, and it had a picture just like this, but unfortunately I loaned my copy and I don't know who I gave it out to, but it had a picture like this. I constructed this picture from a few other sources, and it had a picture like this, and they were all black and white. And somehow I was able to remember this picture. So when in the early days of my kayaking career, I was paddling at the Point Reyes National Seashore near Limantour Beach. And I got too close to shore and didn't realize it. And a wave suddenly broke offshore from me. And this 5 foot tall wall of broken water came at me at what seemed like, 35 miles an hour. And I thought, so this is it, I'm going to die. And but this picture popped into my mind. What are you supposed to do in this situation? And they say, well, you're supposed to raise the edge that faces the beach. You're supposed to go into a brace. You're supposed to attack the wave when it gets to you. And it's like, well, I'm going to die, but I might as well, die fighting. And so I did all these things based on this visual memory of this diagram popping into my head. So I still love all the black and white diagrams. And that wave slammed into me. And to my amazement, without ever practicing it, the first time I ever tried a broach and brace, my boat stayed upright and I side surfed all the way to shore, and I was safe and happy. It was absolutely the most wonderful thing. So I think broaching and bracing is this incredible technique that I recommend that everybody learn. This is a diagram from the new version of Derek Hutchinson's book. They're in color now. And like I say, I have that fond memory of the black and white images. Here he's showing somebody broaching and bracing with the low brace because he has a little wave and he doesn't have to reach up into a big wave to hold himself right side up. Now, I would recommend that even by yourself and even well, you want to choose your beach. You want to find a beach that has a soup zone, that has these little piles of white water coming across it. You can paddle part way out into a beach like that, turn your boat sideways, broach and brace, and practice riding the waves back to shore. So this is something you can practice. And it's like, perhaps I shouldn't admit that the first time I actually needed a broach and brace, I hadn't practiced it, but I have practiced it a lot in the surf since then, and I recommend you do that. Here's another picture, also from the newer Derek Hutchinson book. What's wrong with this picture? Does anybody want to make a suggestion?
Why don't you just unmute? There's three. We have so many people here. I can't see the whole screen at once. And all.
Oh.
So There's 58 people right now. So just jump in, just unmute yourself if you want to respond to
If
Mike.
you want to respond. Well, if nobody responds in,
Paddle's too high.
the paddle is too high. Yes. That guy has his elbow and his hand above his shoulder. And if that wave hits that paddle, it's going to dislocate his shoulder. And so that is not a good position to be in. You know, I've been waving my hands around. I think I'm going to turn off my background in case waving my hands around is useful for you guys. So that guy, his shoulder is in danger of being pulled over his head and dislocated. So that I don't like this picture. And as a matter of fact, in the text, if you can read that, it says, "Be prepared for a severe arm wrench." Yeah, right. But if your elbows were down, even if you stuck the paddle out and attacked the wave, you can get the paddle deep into that wave and get a lot of force out of it without having to have it above your head like that. So I keep mentioning books. For example, I have a copy of Waves and Beaches, which is a book by Willard Bascom, who's one of my heroes. He wrote the first textbook on oceanography in the United States. He was an amazing person. If you read that book, it's the most fun you will ever have reading a textbook, because he tells the story about how him and a couple other grad students from UC Berkeley were hired by the Navy to surf a truck, an amphibious truck from the Navy, through the surf to measure to try and figure out why waves break and when they break, so that the U.S. Navy could invade Normandy. And so they drove this amphibious truck out into 30-foot waves and surfed them to shore. And the story is amazing. And so you can read the textbook and learn a lot about waves, or you can read his autobiography called The Crest of the Wave, in which there's more detail, including how he met the love of his life and got married while he was on that trip up the coast of California, learning why waves break. I just found a new book recently called How to Read Water. And one of the subjects I'm going to talk about in a minute is How to Read Water by Tristan Gooley. And it has a chapter on waves, a chapter on beaches, sort of like Waves and Beaches by Willard Bascom. But he's actually quite philosophical, and it's really a fun read. He's a guy who seems to have wandered around through life in a daze, looking at every puddle and creek and river and ocean and sailboat he's ever been on, and looked at the water and asked, why does the water behave like that? And then when he figured out why, he shares it with us. And so you could learn a lot about how to read water, including he spent a lot of time with Polynesian sailors, learning how they traveled long distances in the ocean, and figured out where islands were by looking at how the waves bounce up and down far from the islands. The basic book of it's the basic book of sea kayaking by Derek Hutchinson that I've been that I read, and it's the Coastal Kayakers Manual is second best in my opinion, but I still had a copy of this lying around, and so I used it as for the source of some of those black and white images for this talk. And actually, I should mention that I based my PowerPoint presentation on slides from Dirta and from Steve took some pictures out of the Derek Hutchinson book, and her name is on the tip of my tongue. Also made a lot of the diagrams that I have here. Another Basker made a lot of these diagrams, and of course, like everybody else, I ran all over the internet and stole a bunch of pictures of kayaks in waves to use in this talk.
It was Margot.
Margot, yes, of course. Is she here? Thank you, Margot. Those pictures were wonderful. So wave mechanics is actually a sort of a physics term, for how light behaves, and some of the things that some of those diagrams that I JavaScript things that I am going to use are actually for light, but waves in the ocean behave very similar. For example, light slows down when it comes into a denser media, like from air to glass, and waves slow down as they come from deep water into shallow water. So the mechanics of light and the mechanics of waves are very similar, and so wave mechanics does apply to how you analyze waves. So I'm going to talk about the fundamentals of waves, and there's like two facts that explain a lot of the behavior of water. As a matter of fact, in some way they explain each other. Waves break in shallow water, and waves slow down in shallow water. So fundamentals of waves, well, I have a list here, but let's go see if I have a picture for each of those. The components of a wave, waves at sea are bumps in the water that are traveling. And so energy is stored as potential energy as the water rises to the crest of a wave, and then it falls back down, turning that into kinetic energy as it moves down, and potential energy again as it goes below the zero line and then rises back up again. So a wave has, in the case of light and physics, they typically talk about the amplitude of the wave. So this wave could, from the average wave height, it could go up 4 feet and then down 4 feet and up 4 feet and then down to a negative 4 feet. But when you listen to the weather reports and they say that there's a 8-foot swell, they mean that the wave goes up and down a total distance of 8 feet, which is the same thing as having an amplitude of 4 feet. And then there could be a distance between waves, like there could be a wavelength. And in physics, you hear people talk about the wavelength of red light is 400 nanometers. But in the ocean, especially when you're listening to weather reports, they don't talk about the length of the waves. They talk about the period, the time in seconds between the passage of successive waves. So this could be an 8-foot wave with a 10-second period, 10 seconds between each wave. And there's a misconception that sometimes I have trouble convincing people of this, that because they say, oh, I went out to the ocean and I saw the waves move, but the waves aren't moving. It's the energy. Well, the waves are moving, but the water itself is not moving. The water is flowing, is actually just moving in a circle. The water rises up to the crest of the wave, and then it loops back down to the trough of the wave. And there's this this fun little toy, which I put the URL for this in chat. I'm going to paste it again in case anybody came in late. And you can run this on your second monitor or third monitor, like me, and look at the waves moving. So if you look at this fun simulation, the waves are moving from left to right, but the particles inside the wave are just moving in circles, and the duck is moving in a circle up and then back down again. There's a thing that you will encounter on the ocean, and I call it the horrible sinking feeling when a big wave is approaching. If you're a kayaker and you're sitting on this wave, when waves are happening, the way the wave works is that the particles of water in the wave rise up with the crest. Well, that water is not very compressible, so you can't like have the water expand and make a taller and taller wave. As the wave rises, that mass of water has to come from someplace. So it comes from the trough in the front of a wave, and it comes from the trough behind the wave. By the way, this is the crest of the wave, and this is the trough of the wave, the high part and the low part. And then when the wave relaxes back down again into a trough, all that water has to go somewhere. So it goes to the wave on one side actually, and the wave on the other side. So I like to say that a wave has a trough, and a trough has a wave. And actually, the trough has two waves, one on either side, and even the crest of the wave has a trough on both sides that are contributing material for it to rise. And this becomes important in a minute, but the sinking feeling that I like to describe to people is if you're sitting on this crest and the next wave starts to come, the first thing that's going to happen is your boat is going, the tail of your boat is going to drop down, and eventually at the bottom of the wave, your boat is going to be pulled backwards into the next wave in the by the trough. Though, and that's, you're going to feel that in the pit of your stomach. You're going to feel like, oh my God, I'm on an elevator going backwards, and it doesn't feel like it's going to be good. If you're surfing, that's a good feeling. It means there's a big wave coming, and the deeper that feeling in the pit of your stomach is, the bigger the wave is behind you. And it's kind of nice that if you're focused on the shore, if you're focused on getting ready, say, to land, you can tell how big the wave is behind you by how bad that sinking feeling in your stomach is. So I mentioned that in the slides. In the PowerPoint list. Now, I've heard a thing that many people say, that waves come in sets of 7. And it's kind of unfortunate that this particular slide does have 7 waves in the set, but they don't necessarily come in sets of 7. But there are people who say if you sit on a beach and you see a big wave, then if you count the waves, you'll find that the next big one is going to be 7 waves away from the last big one. And so you wait for a big one, and then you think, oh, there's going to be 4 or 5 good small waves before the next big one. And I don't think that's really true. Waves can come in sets of almost any number. There's 7 here. They can be 3, but the idea is that the wave in the center, which is maybe created by the wind somewhere, or it's created by a boat wake. Boat wakes do this as well, not just wind waves. That the boat creates a single wave, and that wave pulls water out of the trough in front and back of it, and that trough pulls forces water in both directions and creates 2 slightly smaller waves, and those create 2 slightly smaller troughs, and so on. And so you get one big wave in the middle of a set, and then smaller and smaller waves in front of that main wave, and smaller waves behind it. And the amazing thing, if you watch a wake go by, is that what actually happens is that the wave at the trailing edge moves forwards and rises up and gets bigger until it's in the middle, and then it gets smaller again until it disappears at the front of the train of waves. But the whole train moves slowly forward at half the speed of these I call them phase waves. And for a kayaker, this doesn't have to do with getting in and out of the surf, but if you're out on the bay and you want to try and catch a ride on a wake from a ferry, it has a couple of different effects on kayaks. For example, if you're paddling with these and you're trying to surf on them, well, if you miss a ride on the wave, well, there's going to be several more coming behind it. And so you still have a couple more chances to catch a ride. If you're paddling into a boat wake and you want to just get over it, these boat wakes, often the steepest ones, break. So if a wave breaks on the bow of your boat, this is actually kind of good news, because it means that the next wave that breaks is going to be the one that's in front of you, but it's still moving past you, and it will break behind you. So if you're just trying to get over a wave train in the bay, if one breaks on you, then you can relax. The next one is not going to break on you. And so if this can help you to get over these if you want to get over them, and it can help you to take advantage of them if you want to. Now, out at sea, wind waves have this behavior that there'll be one large wave with smaller and smaller waves on either side of it. Then these are waves generated by wind. But then there's something called a swell. And a swell comes from a storm that's hopefully far out at sea. because you don't want to be paddling in a storm, I hope. And so the wind will generate very chaotic waves. And then far away from the storm or after the storm has ended, these waves will travel for thousands of miles sometimes. And as they travel, they have a tendency to line up with each other. So eventually, the chaotic behavior here of lots of different wave heights and lots of different wave periods will apparently exchange energy with each other until they're all about the same size. And of course, if the storm was really close, these waves that are all grouped together now would turn into a single circle of waves. But then after it travels thousands of miles, if it has a 1,000-mile radius, it looks like a straight line to you. And I do have some pictures of a developed swell like that, where if you see a developed swell like from the beach, you'll see a wave, and then you'll see another wave behind it, and you'll see a dark shadow of the next one. You'll see those dark shadows going off to the horizon. Well, that is a developed swell from a storm far at sea, and they look like they're perfectly straight lines, and they tend to have very similar periods. They tend to be the same distance apart from each other. Although, of course, like waves from electromagnetic radiation, you can have waves from several sources coming at once, and they ride on top of each other without losing energy to each other. And so you can have a southern swell from a storm in the South Pacific, and you can have the normal wind waves from the north, and they will just come together and add and subtract to each other. Another thing that happens even in bays and lakes is a phenomenon called fetch, which is this word down at the bottom. And that's a weather term for if you're on the edge of a bay and the wind is blowing offshore, the wind doesn't have very much time to whip up big waves. But if the wind has more time to spend on the water, like if you're on the other side of the same bay and the wind has the entire width of the bay, say 2 miles, to whip up the waves will get larger and larger and larger as the wind has more time to work on them. And so if you're in the bay, that's something to keep in mind, that if you're on one side of the bay and the waves are big, well, if you could get to the other side, they would be smaller if you were closer to the source of the wind. So waves break in shallow water, and according to Willard Bascom, my hero, they break when the water is 1.3 times the wave height or shallower. So a wave will not break until it finds itself in shallow water. So if you're on one of those shallow sloping beaches, there's kind of a minor problem here that the small waves will come very close to shore. Here, let's do a picture. The small waves will come very close to shore and they'll break. And the big waves, because the water out in the deeper water is still 1.5 times the height of the wave, the big waves will break further out to sea. So if your goal is to get out through the impact zone has a width that is depending on the variability of the size of the wave. So the big waves break further out, the smaller waves break closer in. And if you're sprinting over the impact zone, you have to get over that whole distance from one wave, from the smallest wave to the biggest wave, unless of course you chose your moment well, and you went out during a window when there wasn't any big waves. So there's another kind of beach that you don't want to choose if you have a choice, and that's a dumping beach. And that is a beach that has a steep sloping, say, sandy beach. And what happens is that the waves come all the way in and they don't see shallow water until they're right next to shore. And then they break suddenly. And this is a typical case where you see the plunging waves. There's no spilling gentle wave here. And so that is a problem for kayakers for several reasons. One is you don't have a soup zone to get ready in, and then you have the waves dumping on your head, and you have you have no place to get ready to go out there. Now, I don't know if you noticed that the slope of the waves in this beach, the diagram, it looks kind of similar to the last diagram, but that subtle difference in the slope makes a huge difference in how the waves behave. And this is a picture from Monastery Beach, a place that baskers have launched from, and you really have to be good with your timing to get out over a dumping beach. But there's actually kind of a silver lining in that, and that is that the impact zone is very small. So all you have to do is get over that one wave, and then you've made it, and you can relax. So we've been drawing all of these simple diagrams of sloping beaches, and a typical beach actually has a bar or two. And so what'll happen is the beach drops down, and then offshore it rises up again. And sometimes it drops off steeply after that bar. And so you have, they're calling it the surf zone, or the swash zone is what we call the soup zone, and they call the impact zone the breaker zone. And so if you're on a beach and you want to launch from it, you want to look offshore and see, where do the waves break. A nice advantage of a bar is that it's sort of like a dumping beach, in that the big waves and the small waves both suddenly find themselves in shallow water. And so they all break in about the same place. And so the impact zone is smaller, and you don't have to work so hard or so long to get over it. And there are some beaches, like Dillon Beach at the mouth of Tomales Bay, that has several bars, like 2 or 3 of them. And so you might think, oh, the bar is my friend, I have a smaller impact zone, and you climb over it. And then you find you have 2 more bars to get over that are further out. So we keep talking about breaking waves, and how there are plunging ones, which you typically find over a sandbar or on a dumping beach, and spilling waves, where the waves gently find the water getting deeper, and they just spill over and then gently turn into a foam pile. Those are the ones you want to launch over. And the breaking waves, you can get through them with timing and with hard work, moving fast, spearing the wave, making sure you bend over to have your head and your paddle go through the wave with the least resistance. But if you can't avoid it, I like to find easier ways to get out to sea. Now, another side effect of the physics of waves is that.
I think David had a question, Mike.
Oh, which Dave?
This Dave over here.
Oh, hi there.
Hi. How does wind affect the plunging or the spilling waves?
If it's really windy, it could very well be that the waves you're seeing are created by that wind, and therefore you'll see a lot more variability. And so I'd say you're more likely to see waves of different sizes. So you might get hit by a larger one that plunges in the same situation that a smaller one spills.
Okay.
But that's just mostly a guess on my part, sorry to say. So getting back to the slides, a submerged rock also creates a shallow spot. So in this top diagram, the swells are coming in, and the swells are suddenly like a sandbar. The swells are finding themselves in shallow water, and so they break. But you should keep in mind that if the tide goes up, so these 2 diagrams show the tide the middle diagram shows the tide higher, the same wave won't break because it's not deep enough to be 1.3 times the height of the wave. But on that same day, a larger swell could come through, and then it would still break even though the water is deeper. So boomers are a phenomena that often surprise kayakers, that you go paddling, you paddle out to sea, you think that I made it through the impact zone, I'm safe now. And then you paddle over a submerged rock and it breaks on you. And I'm going to talk about that in the reading the water section, we want to spend some time thinking about how do you predict, how do you tell that there's going to be a boomer in front of you and avoid that. So the other wave mechanics phenomena that that affects kayakers a lot is that waves slow down in shallow water, and this causes all kinds of interesting things to happen in the water. And as the How to Read Water book explains, you could just go through your life staring at water, and every time you see it do something interesting, try and guess or figure out why. And these are three of the amazing things that happen that I don't know if any of you have noticed, but waves always seem to hit beaches in parallel. In other words, no matter which direction, north or south, the waves are coming from, they always turn and then they smack into the beach. Waves will focus on points. Waves will defocus or be gentler in a cove than they are on the points on both sides of the cove. And then there's a phenomena that that has risen up and bitten me many times, or well, I've tried to learn my lessons from my mistakes, but long waves will rise up in the shallows. So I have another one of these applets, and it's one that is for light. And if you have a browser, you can play with this later. And it shows what happens when, oh, where'd my cursor go? There it is. That when light comes from, say, air into a glass prism or a lens, it bends in an interesting direction. That it bends, if the light is coming from the right, it bends further to the right. But if the light is coming from the left, it no, wait a minute. That's which right is right. This is your left. It bends to the right, and if it's on your right, it bends to the left. And that means that if light is coming from straight in, it has no effect. Well, this applies to waves in that if you look at when these red lines cross the boundary, the waves slow down when they're in the more denser media, and so the other end of the wave keeps going fast, and because it's moving faster, it ends up being at a different angle by the time that both ends pass through the water, and so the wave is now traveling at a different angle than it was before, and ocean waves and beaches are a special case in that a beach is not like a lens. It's not like a solid piece of glass. A beach is interesting in that it may have, it may be shallow, and it may be where the waves start to feel the bottom. But then immediately after this, it's like there's another piece of glass here and another piece of glass and another piece of glass. It's as if the index of refraction is changing from inch to inch as you get closer to the beach. The water is getting shallower and shallower. And so what the wave actually sees is, as it approaches the shore, it's coming at a more and a more straight on angle until it's coming straight in, and then there's no force left to make it turn, because if the waves kept turning, well, now it's being bent back towards being straight again, as it was being bent towards being more straight here. So the fun thing about this is that a beach is a funny kind of a lens. It's a lens whose index of refraction slowly gets stronger and stronger. It's as if you made a lens out of foam or something that is very thin at the outside and gets denser and denser as you get closer to the center of the lens. And so instead of light suddenly bending at a sharp angle, light will enter the foam lens and it will slowly turn, but it will always end up going in the direction, in the case of a straight prism-like lens like this, it will always end up going towards the opposite side, perpendicular to the slopes here. And I started thinking about this one day while I was paddling, and I think there was a subconscious thing going on that I had some facts in my head, and they all came together at once, and I had an epiphany. I was paddling near Point Arena, and I was thinking about how waves and beaches have this strange phenomena that the index of refraction changes with distance, and so the waves don't suddenly turn; they gently turn towards going straight to shore, and how you could make a lens out of foam like that. And then I remembered that there is an example of technology that we humans use that takes advantage of this, and that is the fiber optic cable, which has a cladding on it that has an index of refraction that changes in layer after layer after layer. And why do they do this? They do this so that if a beam of light inside the fiber optic cable starts to diverge and run outside the fiber optic cable, it runs into layers and layers of different indexes of refraction, and it causes it to bend back and go back into the center of the fiber optic cable. And so we do have technology that works the way that beaches do. We don't use it in our cameras, but we use it in our fiber optic cables. And that's when I realized where I was. And I think my subconscious knew this all along. The beach just north of Point Arena has an AT&T station with underwater cables, where underwater cables come to shore. And that meant at that very moment, I was paddling over 2 or 3 fiber optic cables. And so the technology that uses this shallow water beach idea, though there was actually some of that technology near me at the moment that I had those thoughts.
Mike.
Yes.
Going back one slide,
Yeah.
in your light analogy, you see some of the light being bent and some of the light being reflected off. Do you get reflection off when a water wave hits a shallow area? Do you get some reflection off like that? And if so, is that what causes zipper waves?
Zipper waves are usually caused by waves coming around a rock or around an island. I believe that this gentle change in the index of refraction prevents reflections from happening, and that waves don't reflect unless they run into like a breakwater or a solid wall, and then they reflect off that. But they have a tendency to lose, to not reflect on a gentle change in index of refraction, on a gentle change in depth. And then they reflect if they hit a concrete wall or something. But if they hit the beach, they lose most of their energy in swashing up and down the beach, and they don't reflect much from that. Okay. So waves turn parallel to beaches. And the other fact that this explains is that waves break on points. They turn towards points. I seem to be missing a verb there. Waves turn towards points and they turn away from coves. And so a point typically has some shallow water in front of it. And so as a straight swell approaches a point, it has a tendency for the center of the wave there to slow down. The outer parts of the wave get ahead of it, and the wave tends to turn and wrap around the point and smack the point from both sides. And so a point in a big swell is a place you don't want to be. But if that point is one point in a cove, the 2 points are going to be pulling the energy of the wave towards them. And halfway in between them, in the middle of the cove, the waves are going to have lost a lot of their energy. And so if you're landing on a coastline that you don't know much about, you want to look for points and avoid them, and then look for the coves in between them and land in those. And this produces some beautiful shapes on the ocean. And you can see that this is a developed swell where there's these parallel lines of swell that, if the picture extended further, you can see them far off at sea. And as they come in, they rise up in the shallow water. They bend around and break on the points. And then in this case, they're bending practically 90 degrees to get into this cove. And then these gentle waves are breaking on the cove. And if you look carefully at this picture, you can see a whole bunch of little black dots in the water. And that Those are surfers, board surfers. Although I don't know, there may be some kayak surfers in here. So this big swell is coming in and it's wrapping around the point and it's breaking in these beautiful ways that that everybody can ride. And so they're riding these waves, perhaps even all the way around the point there. And this picture on the left is another point with waves breaking on it. And there's a beach here. You can see the waves haven't quite turned parallel yet, but they're working on getting parallel to that sandy beach. Now here's a thing that waves slow down when they get in shallow water. This is something that has surprised the heck out of me, that I've looked at the weather forecast and I've said, oh, they're predicting 2-foot swell. That's going to be easy. I'm going to jump in my kayak and I'm going to go on a 1-week trip down the coast of California. And I get in the water and all of a sudden these gigantic waves come out of nowhere. What the heck is going on? And it turns out I didn't read the report carefully enough. And that 2-foot swell was 20 seconds long. That means there's a 2-foot wave and then it gently goes down and it gently rises back up and there's another 2-foot swell. So what? Well, when you get close to shore and the water is shallow, those long period waves, the front end of the wave has time to slow down and then the back of the wave catches up to it. So here's this long 2-foot swell, but when the front end of the wave slows down, there's all this water in here. Where does it go? It rises up as the back of the wave catches up with it. It pushes the water up and the wave gets taller and taller. And then what you thought was going to be a gentle, easy day on the ocean turns out to be nasty, giant breaking waves near shore, even though once you get past them, it's a gentle day out away from shore. But if you wanted to go rock gardening, a long period swell is the wrong forecast for that. Now in places like Bolinas, and you want to go surfing, having the waves rise up as they get close is really great. But this isn't a class about surfing. Wow, how am I doing for time? I'm just about perfect. So the third subject is reading the water. And I'm going to talk about all these points with other slides. So I have a concept I call defense in depth. You may have heard that. It's kind of an engineering term. And like I mentioned before with the book about how to read the water by Gooley, you study the water everywhere you go. And as a matter of fact, this isn't something I think you can teach. You have to go out on the ocean and watch how it behaves. And every time it does something funny, try and figure out why, hypothesize about why it behaves that way, and then learn maybe from your mistakes, from having a big wave break on you, what that meant, and then using what you learned to predict the same thing happening again and avoiding it. But defense in depth is an idea I like, that when you go out on the ocean, are you safe? I had a friend of mine ask me once, the girlfriend of a friend of mine who got surfed ashore and knocked out of her boat. We had to help her get back out again, and we had to help her get through the surf. And when we made it through the surf, she said, "Am I safe now?" And I said, "No, you're on the ocean. You're never safe here." But you can make it a lot safer. And you can do that with what I call defense in depth, where you have layers and layers of ways to protect yourself. So the first layer in my list of defense in depth is you paddle with your friends. So if you're out and you paddle over a boomer without realizing it, it breaks on you, it knocks you out of your boat. Well, your friends come over and they do a T-rescue and they get you back in your boat. That's the first layer of defense. Well, if your friends aren't handy, or if they're too far away, or they don't see what happens to you, you should learn self-rescues so that if this happens to you, you can get back in your boat yourself. And I think broaching and bracing is a really powerful technique. If you practice that in the surf, it eventually becomes automatic, and you don't even have to look at the waves. You can be out in the surf, and all of a sudden you hear that noisy water breaking behind you. You automatically go into that high brace and attack the water behind you. So if your broach and brace is really strong, when that boomer surprises you and breaks on you, you're already bracing and you're side surfing out of you. Well, the wave could be very big, or it could have surprised you, or you could have just not been ready for it, and you could still get knocked over. And so the one, two, three, the fourth layer of defense is you should learn to roll. And then even though your brace failed, you can roll back up again. And when I learned to roll, it was a watershed event, pun intended, that once I became so confident that I could roll up. I didn't care if I was right side up or upside down. I was willing to really lean on my brace, to really use that brace much more than I'm kind of afraid. Well, I can brace, but what happens if I hold it too long, or the water doesn't hold it up and it sinks? What am I going to do? I'll just roll up now. But as a result of that, my brace became so good that I didn't even need my roll as much as I thought I would. It's like the Zen of kayaking. The better your roll is, the less often you fall over, and the less often you actually need it. As a matter of fact, I'm currently way out of practice with my roll. I probably should go practice that some more. And then the fifth layer of defense is, what if you were reading the water in front of you and you saw the water do something and you said, that is the result. What I'm seeing on the water, what I'm reading, is the boomer, that it hasn't happened yet. And you just turned your boat 10 degrees and paddled a few feet further out to sea. And when that big wave came, it didn't knock you over, because reading the water allowed you to avoid trouble. So here's 5 layers of skills that you can learn to keep yourself out of trouble or to recover from it. So the color of the water can help you tell what's going on in front of you. And did I mention here, excuse me, while I go back? No, I didn't mention that part of the what I call the reading of the water is developing a model. I guess I'll developing a model of what's going on under the water, or even on the bottom. So if you see the water swirling around in front of you, well, that could be water flowing over a shallow rock. Although if you look carefully at this picture, you may see it's a critter. I think it's a trout in fresh water, but it was the best picture I could find of the water swirling in front of you and making you think there might be something going on under there that you should avoid. So the turbulence, the swirling of the water in patches is a clue that you can use to tell that there's something going on. Dark patches in the water is another clue. This is a really wonderful example in that you have this beautiful clear water and this white sand in between the rocks, and so it's really obvious. In our water here in California is very turbid, and so the water is very dark. As a matter of fact, it's probably the wine dark sea. So our wine dark water is so dark that it's not this obvious where the rocks are, but you can see like what looks like a dark shadow under the water. And that may make you think that there's if you don't see swirling above it, that might make you think that there's a shallow rock underneath you, and you should avoid that spot. And another thing you might see here is that some of the waves are breaking over these rocks. And so the waves are your friend, and they might show you water breaking over rocks that you hadn't noticed before, and remind you that you should be on the lookout for other clues like turbulence or color to tell you where the rocks are and where you should go to avoid them. Now, kelp has an advantage that it calms down a rough sea. The waves usually don't break in kelp, so you might think on a rough day that you will want to paddle in the kelp. But even on a rough day, paddling in kelp is hard, and your boat always slows down, and you have to push through the kelp to get going again, and your paddle is stopped, and you can't move through it. So if you are paddling in kelp, every once in a while, you may see, this isn't a good example of that, you might see a bare patch where there's no kelp, and you think, oh, there's a place where I don't have to work so hard, and I'm going to paddle in that. Well, shallow rocks in the kelp, when the waves do come through, and when they do break over those shallow rocks, they have a tendency to tear the kelp up and kill it. And so in a field of kelp, you might see round bare spots, and those are places to avoid because that means there's a shallow rock there, and a wave still might break there even after coming through the kelp, where it's generally calm. Another thing you'll see in the color of the water, if you look at this picture, over on the left, the water is turning more and more wine dark over here. But then it suddenly, well, maybe not suddenly, but if you're paddling a kayak, say outside of Tomales Bay, you might be paddling blithely along and then notice that underneath you, the water has turned this yellow color. Well, that's the color of sand, and it means you just paddled over a sandbar. And if there are waves coming in, they're going to break over that sandbar, and you had better be ready for them, or you had better get away from here as soon as you can. I think this is actually a picture of tide going over sand, and it's also doing something that you would see at Dillon Beach. And that is you're paddling blithely along and the water is the normal wine dark color. And then you'll see clouds of sand boiling up underneath you until you can actually see them through the water. And that is another sign that you're paddling over a sandbar and that there's shallow water under you, and it's something to pay attention to. So the color of the water is dark if you are in deep water, and it turns sandy color. It turns darker colors over rocks, and that color of the water is something to pay attention to. So the way that I use the color of the water and some of these other tricks is that I build a model of the bottom. Well, when I say build a model, this is something your brain knows how to do. When you look at the world around you, are you actually seeing the world? No, you're seeing a bunch of light strike your eye, and your brain is building a model of the world. It's saying, I see a keyboard over here, I see a monitor over there. You're putting together clues from the environment to build a model of what's around you. So your eyes we're visual creatures, and your eyes can do that very well. But you can also do this you can help your brain out to build this model by using clues like the color of the water, and building a model of where you think things are. And so here's a picture. I think this is Kim Patterson, and she's paddling through a rock garden that's mostly submerged rocks. I think I see a rock there. I see some rocks far offshore, and I see swirling water all over the place. Just in front of her kayak here, there's some swirling water that looks really suspicious to me. And so Kim is like me, is looking at this rock garden. She apparently wants to go someplace. And so she's paddling through something you might think is very dangerous, but she's picking her way through it by building a model. I see where these rocks are. And I can tell, I can see, I can perceive the rocks that I can't even see because I see the swirly water, I see the dark patches. So I know where the rocks are that I can't see. And in my mind, I'm imagining this minefield of rocks all around me. And then I can use that model to pick my path through the rock garden. So I can use something that I can't even see to help me navigate through the coastline. Now, there's a fun thing that happens in a rock garden like this, like launching and like landing and many other situations. If you wanted to go through this rock garden, you could stop outside the rock garden and assess it for a while. And here's a fun thing, that the big waves are your friends. Because when a big wave enters this rock garden, it's going to have a big trough in front of it and a big trough behind it. And if you can see into those troughs, you're going to see the submerged rocks that you couldn't see when the water was in the way. And so you can watch a big wave go through a rock garden and say, there's a rock over here I didn't see, there's a rock over there I didn't see. And even a small wave will go through a rock garden like I showed you in that picture with the beautiful blue water between the rocks. Even a small wave will break over some of the rocks in the rock garden, some of the submerged rocks, and show you where they are. And so in your memory, you remember where you saw those, and you build that model of what the bottom of the ocean looks like, and you use it to navigate. Another thing that I use is to use the geology of the land to predict the geology of the seafloor. I've mentioned this several times that points don't just end when they enter the water, they continue offshore and they slowly get deeper and deeper. And that generates those wonderful refractions that cause swell to wrap around a point and to stay away from the coves that you want to land in. And so I look at a point ahead of me and I'm imagining what the topology, or there's a word, bathyspheremy or something, of what the surface of the bottom of the water is. And I also imagine long periods of time. For example, if I see an island just offshore, well, I imagine that a long time ago, that was a peninsula or a point. And the ocean has been grinding the shore away, and the hard rock in that island allowed it to survive that. But since this used to be a peninsula, it means that between the peninsula and the shore, there may be a shallow area that hasn't been ground down as much yet. And so I am especially cautious when I go behind an island because there might be shallow water there. And so I build a model of what that peninsula used to look like, and then project it into the present and say, I'll bet there's shallow water there. I add that to my model. And a cove is the reverse of that. They typically have smooth, sandy bottoms. And so if you see a cove between 2 points, you imagine that bottom continuing on underneath, and you know it will be safe to paddle across that cove, and you can relax. I used to think that steep cliffs would be interesting, that a steep cliff would drop into the water and then it would continue down under the water. And so the water would be very deep in front of a cliff and waves would reflect off of a cliff, but they would not break. But I've rarely found that. I can think of 2 places where I found a steep cliff that you could paddle up close to, because usually the cliffs are eroding and they pile up material in front of them, and then the sand collects in that and it turns into a shallow area. And so there's typically a shallow area in front of a cliff, and you can't always get close to them. Now, a long sandy beach will continue out to sea. Sometimes they'll have sandbars, but they also have that tendency of the bigger waves to break further out. So I often find myself paddling pretty far away from long sandy beaches because I'm worried about the bigger waves breaking in the shallow waterway out there. Another trick that I've used relating similar to the geology is to look for patterns in offshore rocks. For example, if you see a row of rocks that seem to be lined up precisely with each other, well, it could be that this was caused by some dike of rock that's been worn away, and so now it used to be a solid sheet of rock, and now it's a bunch of separate rocks. Maybe they're connected together underneath the water still, and that means that there's shallow areas between the rocks. And it could mean that this long string of rock might continue under the water on one side or the other. And so even if I decide to be safe, I'm going to paddle around it. As I cross that imaginary line in the water, in my model, I'm imagining that line continuing under the water, and I'm on the lookout for boomers in that area, for shallow rocks that the bigger waves will break over. And I've noticed that flat top rocks are often created by sedimentary layers. And so you can see the layers in the rocks. You see flat tops on rocks. Well, the ocean really loves to grind away the softer layers in sedimentary rocks. And so it's really likely to find flat top rocks that are submerged. And flat top rocks are really good at breaking waves. And so when you see flat top rocks in the neighborhood, I start being on guard for their submerged buddies. And then here's a picture of a beautiful row of caves at Russian Gulch. And if you paddle out of Russian Gulch and go around the first point, you'll see this first arch. And It's an arch that leads to a cove that has a cave in it that leads to another cove that leads to another cave that goes all the way to shore, and then there's open sky on that beach. And so I use this amateur geology to think there must have been a defect in the rock that made it softer here, and the ocean was able to carve a large cave here, and that millions of years ago, this was all one big sheet of rock with the ocean boring a cave through it. And then since then, the ocean has worn the coastline away and carved those coves that broke into these waves on the other side of this arch. But that means that where this picture was taken might have been inside a cave in the deep, dark past. And so if you turn around and look out to sea in the direction that these caves are pointing, you will see that there's 2 rows of rocks on both sides leading out to sea, pointing in the same direction that this cave is pointing. And so I am sitting in a deep channel that was carved millions of years ago when this cave was carved. And on the offshore side, there's a row of rocks that used to be the wall of the cave. And the big waves are breaking on those rocks. And so it's a really fun place to go as your skill level improves, because even on a day with large waves, as long as they're not too large, they will break on that reef created by that ancient cave wall. And on a large day, you can paddle through this arch, depending on the direction of the waves as well. And you can get to this arch on a day when you think the conditions are so bad, I'm not going to be able to go anywhere. Well, you can go through this beautiful arch on many rough days, and you can get into those coves. And if the waves are coming from the right direction, the coves are calm, and you get to go explore even in this rough situation. So that's the end of my hints and tricks that I use for reading water. Here's a picture. If anybody wants to guess, actually, I think I may have given it away. You're on a sandy beach and you see the water doing this weird thing. It's like, oh my God, what is it doing? And is it dangerous? Or
Rip.
It's a rip. Yeah, you gave it away. It's a rip current. And can you use a rip current? I'll bet you could use a rip current to help you get offshore. And a rip current may be digging a deeper channel in the water, and although it may also be piling some sand off outshore and creating a boomer, but a rip, you hear lots of people on the web talking about rips, and they're always saying how dangerous they are. Well, I don't know. For a kayaker, a rip might help you get offshore, and it might be a calm area to come in close to shore to get past the impact zone, and then you turn into the soup zone and take a gentle ride to shore. So I think for kayakers, a rip might be a great thing. But I think that tides and currents is a whole nother subject, and I am out of slides, and so that's the end of my talk. And now, if there's any questions, since I can't see you all at once, just break in and start talking.
Mike, I have a question.
Sure.
This is Deborah. So how I can tell by looking at, waves and swell and getting an idea of what conditions on the water are like, but how do we gauge what it's going to be like, what the surf's going to be like for landing on a beach?
From offshore, you can watch the waves break from behind. And so if you see the waves waiting and waiting and waiting until they slam and then they immediately rise up on the beach, that's a dumping beach, and you probably don't want to land there. If you are offshore and you see the waves break far from shore, and then later you see lines of white water heading towards shore, that's a gently sloping beach, and that's the beach that you might like to land on. And it's hard to tell sometimes, but if the waves, even the big waves and the small waves, break in the same place, well, that's a sandbar, which is good news because you just have to get over that sandbar and you're home free. So I would say spend some time offshore looking at the waves from behind and maybe looking at them from different angles, and you can develop that model of what the bottom looks like under those waves, and it might inform how you should approach getting to shore.
And that's good. But I'm also, so there's that when you're already there, but
Ah,
suppose you're planning a trip and you're thinking like,
ah,
is there a chance I can like launch at Half Moon Bay and maybe have lunch on a beach? Like, how can I ahead of time look at conditions and have a sense of whether it might be landable or not?
um, well, if you look at charts, they will have a little dotted symbol that says that there's a sandy beach here. If you look at the weather reports and you know that that there's only a 6-foot swell at every 7 seconds, you'll know that the conditions close to shore are going to be pretty nice. But I have done a lot of trips where for day after day after day, I have no idea what the conditions are going to be like at the end of the next day or the next day or the next day. And I'd say you just really need to develop the skills of reading the water, of reading the beaches, and being really confident in your broach and brace. And especially after that first time when my first broach and brace absolutely astonished me and how well it worked, and I've been working on it ever since, I have a really high degree of confidence that I could land almost anywhere. Well, dumpy beaches are still hard, but I could land almost anywhere. I could find someplace I could land. And so, and also, in case I have to land on something that has a lot of rocks, when I'm on a long expedition day after day, not knowing what the conditions are going to be like, I paddle a Prion Kodiak, which is a very tough plastic boat, and I have a lot of confidence that it will survive landing, perhaps even in conditions where I won't survive it.
Okay, so you're gonna get a sense of what the waves and swell conditions are, but you're also gonna be thinking about what's the beach condition. I mean, what kind of a beach are we talking about? Gentle or
Yeah.
deep or?
For example, when I was paddling the California coast, I used the California, what's that? The guy who flew down the coast in a helicopter and took a
Oh,
picture.
yeah.
The the California Coastal Survey, or what, that's not its name. It has another name. So those pictures were high enough resolution that I could look at a beach. And in the case of a long trip, I not only want it to be a good place to land, and I want it to be a good place to launch from, I also wanted to have room to camp on during high tide. And so from the coastal survey pictures, I was able to look at a beach and say, oh, it has a berm, it has a flat spot above the high tide line, and that'll be a great place to camp. So the coastal picture photos are helpful, and the Google Maps are helpful. Although one time I was fooled, I looked down at a beach from outer space and I saw this big sandy beach, and I thought, oh, I'll be able to land there. But when I got there, I discovered it wasn't a sandy beach. It was a sandstone cliff that went up at 45 degrees. And so it turned out I was not able to land there. And so in the case of long trips, I start looking early in the day. Can I land here? Oops, no. Well, I'll just keep paddling and keep looking until I find a beach that I can land at.
Okay. I just feel like there's also, in addition, I love everything you've said, but I also know there are some numbers involved with like, like if there's a 3-foot wave, but a 20-foot,
Oh,
like, can you talk numbers a little bit?
yeah. Well, obviously, if the swell is 20 seconds long, no matter how high it is, you're going to have trouble landing.
Mhm.
Although, in the case of like a southern swell on top of the local northern swell, the northern swell, it'd be very easy to land, very easy to land. But those are 5 or 6 seconds apart. And then every 20 seconds, oh my God, a monster comes through. So you obviously, you read the weather report, and if you see a 20-foot swell in the forecast coming from the south, you say, I think I'm going to, go for a hike today. If you have no choice, which has happened to me, you say, oh my God, a southern swell came up, and it wasn't in the forecast that I read before I left. So I'll get close to a beach and I'll wait for for several 20-second periods, and I'll watch these huge waves break and go in. Then I'll watch the second one come by, and then I know I have 20 seconds. And so I'll paddle like mad over the smaller northern swell, and I'll get to some place where even if the 20-foot one breaks, I'm past its impact zone. It's going to break further out, and then when it does break, I can broach and brace and side surf it to the beach. Going out is a little harder because you have to climb over it probably anyway. Are you done? Can I go to another question?
Yeah, thank you. That was super helpful.
Tom.
Yeah, Mike, I have a question. When you're on a trip and your kayak is loaded with food and gear and water and so forth, how does that affect the way that you approach landings and launchings through surf?
Well, I have discovered that well, I have learned to surf as well, but a loaded boat doesn't surf worth beans usually. And so surfing is great in that you only have to wait for one wave and then surf it all the way to shore. And side surfing, I guess side surfing can do the same thing, but when you're surfing, you don't mind the big wave and you don't mind riding the big wave closer to shore. And so a loaded boat rarely surfs. And so I have to depend more on a broach and a brace. But other than that, I don't find a loaded boat broaches any harder or easier than an empty one. I guess there is something that I didn't mention that does happen. That happens less often with a loaded boat is that an empty boat is so light that as you're broached and going towards shore, the boat will rise up and fall back down the face of the wave. And so it's a bucking bronco ride. You go thumpa, thumpa, thumpa towards the shore. And a loaded boat doesn't rise up on the wave as easily. And so the ride is actually smoother, and you feel like you are working less hard on the brace. But that's only something that I'm thinking of now because you asked the question. I never noticed that before. John, or John's better half. Don't forget to unmute your mic.
Are we unmuted now?
Yes.
Yes.
So Mike, you gave us a nice example of a steep dumping beach.
Yeah.
What are examples of nice shallow beaches, and where do you like to go to practice your broach and brace?
Well, I live up in Sonoma County, so Salmon Creek Beach was one of my favorites. Salmon Creek, though, changes every year. And so sometimes it has sandbars and sometimes it doesn't. That's probably true of any beach. And I think if you want to practice, I would recommend going to a beach at high tide because the water is comes up further and it covers more of the gentle sloping part of the beach. And if there are sandbars, they're further away, and then you don't have to go out and deal with them right away. So Dillon Beach at Bodega Head is not so good. Oh, wait a minute, that's Doran Beach. Dillon Beach at the mouth of Tamales is a good beach to practice at. And then there aren't a lot of good choices until you get to Half Moon Bay. There's the microwave inside the reef, away from the Mavericks. There's a little cove there, and gentle waves come in that cove, and those are good to surf. And they might even be too gentle that there aren't going to be very many breakers to practice side surfing in. Somebody else must have some good suggestions for beaches to go to. Yeah.
It's Alan, and I learned how to surf at or surf landings a lot at Drake's Beach.
Oh, and then there's Bolinas. Bolinas Bay is a famous surf spot, and you can take your boat along the beach and I say get away from the mouth of the bay. There's current issues there where the water goes in and out, but launching off of that street where there's the the tennis courts. If the waves are rough there, you can drag your boat along the beach and find gentler and gentler waves until you can find a place to practice your broach and brace there.
Stinson would be good
So-
too.
Yeah.
There's also the beach in front of the Monterey Bay kayaks in Monterey.
Yeah.
It's very gentle, and as you go north, it gets more and more severe. So you can just
Oh,
pick
severe.
your place.
That's lots of ideas. Thanks. I'm familiar with Bolinas. I love the beach at Bolinas, but Bolinas is very unfriendly. The parking is difficult. Everything about Bolinas, there's, no bathrooms available. It's just all, they don't want you there. So once
Yeah.
you get there, it's great. Once you're on the water, it's my favorite place.
Yeah. My solution was to get there very early in the morning.
Yeah.
Jan.
Mike, you mentioned the rule of thumb that the waves break at about 1.3 times the wave height.
Yeah.
Is that the trough to crest height that we usually measure it in, or is that the amplitude that is half the height that you mentioned in your wave model early on?
I'm pretty sure that yeah, I'm almost positive that it's the trough to peak, the not the amplitude. And I just flipped open Waves and Beaches, and he has a diagram here of a breaking wave, and he has the arrow that says height of the breaker. So I'm pretty sure he's measuring bottom to top.
Yeah, that would correspond to my experience as well. Just wanted to clarify because that I was wondering. I never realized that that is the amplitude is actually half the height. So that discrepancy that you highlighted in one of your early slides, I never realized that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the story of how they measured the waves is absolutely amazing. Today, I've actually seen guys at Scripps Institute with jet skis that have giant GPS antennas on them, driving around in the surf in a jet ski and measuring the topology of the bottom. And those poor guys back in the 1930s, 1940s, they had to actually surf a truck to shore while throwing a plumb bob off the edge and reading numbers into a radio off of a string. And that's where this formula came from, was from that kind of amazing work back before they had a GPS or transponder or ultrasonic transponders or side scanning sonar. It's a wonderful story.
It sure sounds like you had a good time doing that, though.
One of the most amazing parts of that story is that he was a geology student from the Midwest, and he came out to Berkeley to visit some friends of his, and they said, "Oh, the Navy is hiring people. Come work on this project." And as a result of that, he ended up changing his major and becoming one of America's premier oceanographers. But he had grown up in the Midwest. He had never seen the ocean. The first time he saw the ocean was while driving north on Highway 101 through Eureka. And one of the guys on the truck was a surfer, and he pointed offshore, and there was this row of angry water out there. And the surfer said, "You see that row of angry water out there? That's a 30-foot wave breaking over a sandbar. And we're going to surf this truck on that wave." And our hero is from the Midwest. And he says, "Well, the Pacific Ocean is 30,000 miles, 3,000 miles wide. A 30-foot wave is really small compared to that." So he said, "Okay."
Okay, well, I think we're kind of beyond our allocated time, but Mike,
Yep.
that was fantastic and hugely full of information and great stories. So thank you very much. And thanks everybody for joining us. And next week's is going to be Nathan Moody talking about expeditioning and packing for expeditions. So we should have another great one. But thanks again, Mike. And
Okay.
good night.
See you
Thanks,
next
Mike.
week.